The sleek conference room at Summit Ventures felt like a tomb. 6 investors in expensive suits sat around the polished table, their faces a mixture of boredom and barely concealed disdain. I had just finished my presentation about Neuratech, my AI-powered predictive analytics platform that could revolutionize supply chain management. "Let me get this straight," Michael Thorne, Summit's managing partner, said with a smirk. "You think you've built an AI that can predict supply chain disruptions better than Amazon's own systems? Better than what Target and Walmart have spent billions developing?" I stood my ground, tablet in hand, the platform's interface still glowing on the screen behind me. The test results speak for themselves. Neuratech has achieved 97% accuracy in predicting supply chain disruptions up to 6 months in advance. "That's worthless," Thorne interrupted, leaning back in his chair. "Your product is worthless, Ms. Morgan. You're a software engineer with no business experience, no major clients, and no understanding of how enterprise software actually works." The other investors nodded in agreement, already closing their portfolios, already dismissing me. They had made up their minds before I'd even walked in. "Thank you for your time," I said quietly, gathering my materials. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't waver. I had learned long ago that showing weakness in rooms like this was fatal. As I walked out, I heard one of them chuckle. "Can you believe she thought she could compete with Amazon?" I smiled slightly, thinking about the email sitting in my inbox, the one they hadn't let me mention. The one from Amazon's head of strategic acquisitions, requesting a private demo of Neuratech next week. But that would come later. First, I had a story to tell. A story that started 3 years ago, in a very different room, with a very different kind of rejection. 3 years earlier. "I'm sorry, Olivia, but we're going to have to let you go." I sat in my supervisor's office at Global Logistics Solutions, staring at the man who had just ended my 8-year career as a supply chain software developer. Dave Miller shifted uncomfortably in his chair, trying to look sympathetic, but mostly looking relieved. "The automated prediction system you proposed, it's just too experimental. Too risky. We need to stick with proven solutions." I nodded slowly, thinking about the hundreds of hours I'd spent analyzing supply chain failures, the patterns I'd discovered, the solution I'd built in my free time. I had shown them how their current system missed crucial warning signs, how it failed to connect seemingly unrelated data points that could predict disruptions months in advance. They hadn't just rejected my idea. They had fired me for developing it independently, claiming it violated my employment agreement. They wanted safe, predictable, mediocre. I gave them what they wanted: a quiet exit, a signed NDA, a promise not to compete directly with their outdated systems. What they didn't know was that I had already laid the groundwork for something much bigger. The termination package they offered, 6 months' salary as severance, wasn't just the end of my career at GLS. It was seed funding for my revolution. I spent the first month building out the core of Neuratech in my home office. 18-hour days fueled by coffee and determination. My savings dwindled. My friends worried. My family suggested more realistic career options, but I had seen something none of them could see. In the massive datasets I had analyzed at GLS and the countless supply chain disruptions I had studied, there were patterns. Subtle connections that human analysts missed. Early warning signs that existing software couldn't detect. The breakthrough came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, 4 months after my firing. I had been working on a new type of neural network, one that could process supply chain data differently. Instead of looking for direct cause and effect relationships, it identified complex patterns across seemingly unrelated factors. Weather patterns in Southeast Asia, social media sentiment about manufacturing companies, currency fluctuations in emerging markets, minor shipping delays that, when viewed in isolation, seemed insignificant. But when you connected them properly, when you let the eye see the bigger picture, they became crystal clear warning signs of major disruptions. I called it the Nexus Protocol, an AI system that could see the invisible threads connecting global supply chains, predicting problems before they emerged. The first test run was on historical data from a major electronics manufacturer's 2019 supply chain crisis. Neuratech spotted the warning signs 6 months before the disruption hit. Signs that every other system, every human analyst, had missed. I ran more tests: pharmaceutical supply chains, automotive parts, retail inventory. Each time, Neuratech found the patterns. Each time, It predicted the disruptions with uncanny accuracy. By month 5, I had a working prototype. By month 6, I had preliminary patents filed. What I didn't have was money. The severance was running out, and AI infrastructure isn't cheap. That's when I met Sophia Martinez. She found me through a tech forum where I had posted some theoretical questions about neural network architecture. She was a former supply chain executive turned angel investor, and she understood immediately what I was building. This isn't just software, she said during our first coffee meeting. This is a fundamental shift in how we understand supply chain dynamics. She invested $250,000 for a 5% stake. More importantly, she introduced me to her network. Small companies willing to beta test the system. Data scientists who helped refine the algorithms. Lawyers to strengthen the patents. For the next 2 years, we built in silence. No flashy announcements, no TechCrunch articles. Just quiet, relentless improvement. Neuratech evolved from a prediction tool into a comprehensive supply chain intelligence platform. It didn't just spot potential disruptions, it suggested alternative suppliers, calculated risk factors, and provided detailed mitigation strategies. The early clients were small, but the results were undeniable. A medical supply company avoided a critical shortage by switching suppliers 2 months before their primary vendor faced a production crisis. A food distributor rerouted their entire logistics network a week before unprecedented storms shut down major shipping lanes. Word started to spread in certain circles. The right circles. Companies began reaching out quietly, asking for demos, wanting to test the system against their own data. That's when the first acquisition offer came. A major consulting firm offered $50 million for the technology. I declined. They came back with $100 million. I declined again. Because by then, I had seen the full potential of what we had built. Neuratech wasn't just another enterprise software tool. It was a window into the hidden patterns that governed global commerce. And someone else had noticed. Someone big. The email arrived on a Thursday evening, just 2 days before my ill-fated meeting at Summit Ventures. Dear Ms. Morgan, I lead strategic acquisitions at Amazon. We've been following Neuratech's development with great interest. Our preliminary analysis suggests your predictive accuracy exceeds anything currently available in the market. We would like to arrange a private demonstration next week. Regards, James Wilson, VP of Strategic Acquisitions, Amazon. I hadn't mentioned the email during my pitch at Summit Ventures. I hadn't mentioned the other interested parties, the preliminary acquisition talks, the major retailers quietly testing the system. Let them think Neuratech was worthless. Let them dismiss the woman who had spent 3 years building something they couldn't understand. Because in exactly 1 week, when Amazon's offer became public, when their phones started ringing with calls from reporters asking about the startup they had laughed out of their office, they would learn a valuable lesson. Sometimes the most valuable things are the ones you're too blind to see. I stepped into my car outside Summit Ventures, checking my calendar. The Amazon demo was scheduled for Tuesday morning. Everything was ready. Everything was perfect. Let them laugh. In a week, the laughter would stop, and a very different sound would fill those expensive conference rooms. The sound of opportunity slipping through their fingers. Amazon Seattle headquarters loomed against the gray morning sky, a testament to what happens when someone builds something others call impossible. I straightened my blazer, checked my reflection in the lobby's polished marble, and took a deep breath. Ms. Morgan, a tall woman in a crisp suit approached, tablet in hand. I'm Jennifer Hayes, James Wilson's chief of staff. They're ready for you in the executive conference room. The elevator ride to the 23rd floor was silent. I used those 30 seconds to center myself, remembering every dismissive investor, every doubting executive, every person who said it couldn't be done. Their skepticism had only made Neuratech stronger. The conference room doors opened to reveal a scene very different from Summit Ventures. Instead of bored investors checking their phones, 12 intense-looking people sat forward in their chairs, laptops open, clearly having done their homework. James Wilson, Amazon's VP of Strategic Acquisitions, rose to greet me. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with the focused energy of someone who evaluated revolutionary technology for a living. Ms. Morgan, he said, shaking my hand firmly. Thank you for coming. We've been analyzing Neuratech's test results for the past month. Frankly, they seem too good to be true. I smiled, setting up my laptop. That's why I brought a challenge for you. Give me your 3 most difficult supply chain disruptions from the past year. Ones you didn't see coming. Let's run them through Neurotech Live. A murmur of interest ran through the room. James glanced at his team, then nodded. Amanda, get the Singapore semiconductor crisis data. Peter, the Brazilian transport strike, and let's see the European energy shortage numbers. For the next 2 hours, I ran Neurotech through its paces. The system didn't just identify the warning signs they had missed. It showed exactly how those signs connected, how they amplified each other, how they created the perfect conditions for disruption. When I showed how Neurotech could have predicted the semiconductor crisis 8 months in advance, a heavy silence fell over the room. These people had lived through that crisis, had dealt with the fallout, had explained to their bosses why they hadn't seen it coming. This is, James paused, choosing his words carefully, significantly more advanced than anything we've evaluated. How did you achieve this level of predictive accuracy? I pulled up the Nexus protocol architecture, because everyone else is looking at supply chains as linear systems. Action and reaction. Cause and effect. But they're not linear. They're neural. Every point connects to every other point in ways that traditional analytics can't see. The technical team leaned forward, eyes widening as they understood the implications. This wasn't just better software. This was a fundamental reimagining of how supply chain intelligence worked. We'd like to move forward with acquisition discussions, James said finally. Our technical team will need to do a deep dive, of course. But preliminary evaluation looks very promising. I nodded calmly, even as my heart raced. I should mention that we're in talks with other interested parties. Oh, we know, he smiled. Walmart's chief innovation officer has been asking about you. Target's supply chain team ran some tests, and Google's acquisition department has been sniffing around. He leaned forward. But we think Amazon is the best home for this technology. We can scale it globally within months. As I packed up my equipment, James walked me to the elevator. We'll have an initial offer for you by Friday. In the meantime, I suggest keeping this meeting confidential. Once word gets out. He didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew what would happen when the market learned that Amazon was seriously pursuing Neurotech. The next 48 hours were a blur of due diligence meetings, technical reviews, and increasingly urgent calls from other interested parties. Sophia called Wednesday morning, her voice excited. Olivia, something's happening. I just got 3 calls from major VCs asking about Neurotech. What did you do? Amazon's moving fast, I replied, watching my email as another meeting request came in, this one from Google's acquisition team. Words starting to leak. Summit Ventures called, she said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. Suddenly they're very interested in setting up another meeting. I thought about Michael Thorne's smirking face, his dismissive wave. Let them wait. By Thursday afternoon, the technology blogs were buzzing with rumors. TechCrunch published a speculative piece about Amazon's interest in a revolutionary AI supply chain startup. Reuters ran a story about unusual activity in the supply chain software sector. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Investors who had ignored my emails for months now wanted urgent meetings. Former skeptics suddenly saw the genius in Neurotech's approach. Even my old boss from GLS tried to reach out, probably remembering too late who owned the patents. But I was focused on one email, the one that arrived at 4:47 p.m. on Thursday. Dear Ms. Morgan, following our technical review and market analysis, we would like to present Amazon's formal offer for Neurotech acquisition. The initial terms are outlined in the attached document, but the headline number is $500 million, with potential earnouts bringing the total to $650 million. We're prepared to announce next week, pending your agreement. Best regards, James Wilson. I sat in my home office, staring at the number on my screen. $500 million, more with earnouts. For the technology they said would never work. For the company they called worthless. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophia. Summit Ventures is getting desperate. Thorne just offered to come to your house for a meeting. Should I tell him you're busy counting your soon-to-be millions? I smiled, remembering his words. Your product is worthless. How quickly things change when you're proven right. The next morning, I walked into my lawyer's office to review Amazon's offer. The terms were aggressive but fair. They wanted to move fast before Google or Walmart could counter. As we went through the documents, my lawyer's phone kept lighting up with notifications. The story was spreading. Major news outlets were connecting the dots. The business world was about to learn that the biggest tech giant in history was betting big on the startup that everyone else had dismissed. "We should expect significant media attention once this goes public," she said, sliding another document across the desk, "especially given the size of the offer." I nodded, signing where indicated. Let them talk. The numbers speak for themselves. Later that day, as I drove home, I passed the Global Logistics Solutions building where I'd been fired 3 years ago. Their stock had dropped 23% since the first rumors about Neurotech began circulating. Funny how karma works. My phone rang through the car's speakers. James Wilson. "Olivia," he said, sounding excited. "The board just approved the final terms. We're announcing Monday morning before market open. Are you ready for what's coming?" I smiled, thinking about all the people who were about to learn a very expensive lesson about underestimating the wrong person. "I've been ready for 3 years, James. Let's show them what worthless looks like." The weekend passed in a blur of final preparations, legal documents, press statements, technical transition plans. But through it all, I kept thinking about next week, when all those investors who had laughed would open their phones to see the headlines. Because sometimes success isn't just about proving your worth. Sometimes it's about watching others realize exactly how wrong they were. And on Monday morning, when Amazon's press release hit the wires, when the business world exploded with news of the $500 million acquisition, when Summit Ventures phones started ringing off the hook with angry calls from their investors wondering how they had missed this opportunity, I would be sitting quietly in my office, reading every headline, savoring every word. Let them call it luck. Let them say they almost invested. Let them scramble to explain why they dismissed a $500 million company as worthless. I had stopped caring about their opinions 3 years ago. Now I only cared about their regret. Sunday night, as the final hours ticked down to the announcement, I received one last email. From Michael Thorne. "Ms. Morgan, I feel I may have been hasty in my assessment of Neurotech. Perhaps we could meet tomorrow to discuss potential investment opportunities. Best regards, Michael Thorne, Managing Partner, Summit Ventures." I clicked delete without responding. Tomorrow, he would get his answer in the form of headlines he would never forget. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. And sometimes the best response to worthless is to show them exactly what they missed. The stage was set. The papers were signed. And in just a few hours, the world would learn what real value looks like. Monday morning dawned clear and bright. I sat in my home office at 5:30 a.m., watching financial news channels on mute, waiting for the announcement that would change everything. My phone was already buzzing with texts from Sophia. CNBC has a breaking news graphic ready. Bloomberg's running teasers about a major tech acquisition. Wall Street Journal just went live with it. I unmuted the TV just in time to hear the CNBC anchor's voice catch with excitement. Breaking news in the tech sector. Amazon has announced the acquisition of artificial intelligence startup Neurotech for $500 million, with additional earnouts potentially bringing the total to $650 million. The company's AI-powered supply chain prediction technology has been called revolutionary by industry experts. My email inbox exploded. My phone started ringing nonstop. But I was focused on one particular notification. A LinkedIn message from Michael Thorne at Summit Ventures, timestamped 1 minute after the announcement. "Olivia, please call me immediately. We need to discuss this situation." I smiled, remembering his words from just last week. Your product is worthless. Now he wanted to discuss the situation. Funny how $500 million can change someone's perspective. The morning unfolded like a perfectly choreographed symphony of validation. Every major news outlet picked up the story. Tech blogs went crazy analyzing Neurotech's potential impact on Amazon's operations. Supply chain industry publications scrambled to explain how they had missed this revolutionary technology. At 9:30 a.m., the stock market opened. Amazon's stock jumped 3% on the news. Traditional supply chain software companies saw their shares plummet. Global Logistics Solutions, my former employer, dropped 28% in the first hour of trading. By 10 a.m., my lawyer had counted 17 interview requests from major media outlets. The Wall Street Journal wanted to do a profile. Forbes was asking about their 30 under 40 list. TechCrunch had already published 3 different analyses of the acquisition. But the real drama was happening in the venture capital world. Safia kept me updated through a steady stream of texts. 2 partners at Summit just called me in tears. 3 other VC firms that rejected us are facing angry calls from their investors. Someone just leaked that Google was preparing a $600 million counteroffer. They were too late. At 11 a.m., I finally took a call from James Wilson at Amazon. "Olivia," he said, sounding excited but not surprised. "The response is even bigger than we expected. Our technical team is already calling this the most important acquisition since Kiva Systems." I leaned back in my chair, watching CNBC replay clips of their interview with an AI expert explaining why Neuratech's technology was game-changing. "How's the market taking it?" I asked, though I already knew. "We're up almost 4% now. But the real story is what's happening to our competitors. They're all scrambling to explain why they don't have anything like Neuratech. Because they had all dismissed it, just like Summit Ventures had. Just like GLS had when they fired me." At noon, I received an unexpected email from Dave Miller, my former supervisor at GLS. "Olivia, I owe you an apology. When we let you go, we made a terrible mistake. I see that now. The board is asking questions about how we could have missed this opportunity. I'm not sure I'll survive the fallout. Congratulations on your success. Dave." I didn't respond. Some bridges don't need to be rebuilt. The afternoon brought more validation. Technical blogs started dissecting Neuratech's patents, marveling at the sophistication of the Nexus protocol. Supply chain experts published analyses showing how the technology could have prevented major disruptions over the past year. But the most satisfying moment came at 2:47 p.m., when my assistant forwarded me an internal memo that had leaked from Summit Ventures. "All partners, in light of recent events concerning Neuratech's acquisition by Amazon, we need to immediately review our due diligence procedures. The failure to recognize this opportunity represents a significant lapse in judgment that has already drawn criticism from several major LPs. Michael Thorne's position as managing partner will be discussed at Thursday's emergency board meeting. Regards, Board of Directors." I forwarded it to Safia with a single word: karma. Her response came immediately: "He's finished. 2 other partners just called me asking if you consider letting them invest in your next venture. Apparently, being the person who called a $500 million company worthless isn't great for your career." By end of day, the story had evolved from a simple acquisition announcement into something bigger. A case study in how the traditional venture capital world often misses revolutionary technology because of bias and arrogance. CNBC ran a special segment titled "The Billion-Dollar Blind Spot: How VCs Miss Tech Breakthroughs." They interviewed experts about why established firms often fail to recognize transformative technology. Summit Ventures was mentioned repeatedly, not in a good way. As the sun set, I finally allowed myself to really feel it: the validation, the vindication, the pure, undiluted satisfaction of being proved right in the most public, most undeniable way possible. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from James Wilson. "Board wants to fast-track the integration. Can you come to Seattle next week? We're thinking bigger than just supply chain now. This could transform everything." I texted back my agreement, then walked to my window, watching the city lights come alive as darkness fell. 3 years ago, I had stood at a different window, having just been fired, wondering if I was crazy to believe in my idea. Now that idea was worth $500 million, and the people who had laughed were scrambling to explain their short-sightedness. The next morning, I had one important meeting, a breakfast with Sophia to discuss the future. She was waiting at our usual cafe, grinning like a cat that caught a particularly fat canary. "So," she said as I sat down, "I counted at least 30 VC firms that are now claiming they almost invested in Neuratech. Funny how everyone sees the vision after the fact." I smiled, stirring my coffee. "Any word from Summit?" "Total meltdown. 3 major investors have pulled out. Thorne is being pushed out. Apparently, letting the biggest tech acquisition of the year slip through your fingers because of arrogance isn't great for business." We spent the next hour planning next steps. Amazon wanted to scale Neuratech globally, but they also saw applications beyond supply chain. The underlying technology, the ability to see patterns in complex systems, could revolutionize everything from financial markets to climate science.